What is going on, guys, and welcome back to Touchdowns to Home Runs. My name's Bernie. Thank you for joining us today on the Touchdowns to Home Runs show. Hope that your day is going absolutely fantastic. Now, we're within about a week so far of this year's 2021 MLB season, but I already look at one player in particular, and that's Glaber Torres, and some of the issues that he's been having so far this season on both the offensive and defensive side of the baseball. But I look at Gleyber Torres, and these are some issues that, at least for me personally, I've been seeing over the course of really the past several years. So today we're going to be breaking down what I've seen from Gleyber Torres since he's really come up to the major leagues, and also looking at some potential options that the New York Yankees have moving forward with Torres, or potentially moving on in the future. But when we look at Gleyber Torres, he's a 24-year-old shortstop, obviously more than enough potential to develop into a real MLB superstar in the upcoming seasons. Came up in 2018 where he was ranked the number 1 prospect in the system for the Yankees and the number 12 prospect in all of Major League Baseball. He had a very good hitting season in 2019 in terms of his power that we're going to look at in just a little bit, so make sure you stick around. But Glaber, really, we know that he's not tremendous defensively, but really put himself into a position to be considered a very solid offensive shortstop. But really over the course of 2020, and I know he was hurt for part of last year, but also at the start of this year, first week of this season, he's not being great at the plate at all. And if you look in the middle of this site right here, 2021 MLB percentile rankings given to us by baseballsavant.com is basically the StatCast. So what are we seeing in terms of how hard Glaber's hitting the baseball and those kinds of things as well. There's a couple stats that I want to point out in terms of Glaber. Well, first, which is average exit velocity. He's in the bottom 10th percentile of the MLB. So what does this basically mean if you're not a baseball stats guy? Well, Gleyber Torres is not hitting the baseball. And we know that, he went through that big streak of 1 for 4 things with hitting singles. But I've said this even dating back to last year, Gleyber Torres, after the 2019 season, has not been hitting the baseball very hard. He's been getting the singles, he's been getting hits, sure. Even though his average to start the year is only .219, he's not hitting the baseball hard at all. Which brings us into stat number 2, hard hit percentage. He's in the bottom 18th percentile, which means compared to all of the other players who have had plate appearances in baseball this season, he is under 20% in terms of how hard he's hitting the baseball. And if you look at Glaber and the 38 home runs that he hit back in 2019, and then compare him to 2020 and 2021, he's not getting the same extra base hits. And I think that's not only because of exit velocity, he's not squaring up the ball very much. His launch angle is not fantastic, but we'll break that more in just a second. Another stat that I want to focus on, slugging percentage, which basically means expected slugging percentage or adjusted slugging percentage. This stat, again, if you're not a baseball stat guy, basically takes into consideration how hard you're hitting the baseball, your launch angle, all of these different stats from StatCast, and it's putting it together to make a metric that is saying, well, given all of these other stats, what is your slugging percentage supposed to be? And he's in the bottom 38th percentile. Now, I know when you look at baseball stats, sometimes, it doesn't show the story. You could be, having a 250 average, a low OBP, and putting together some really great at-bats. Anybody who's watched baseball for a long time, or particularly played baseball for a long time like I have, that sometimes you just get unlucky at the plate. But a stat like this shows that Gleyber Torres has not been putting together great at-bats at all. He's not putting himself into a great position to hit the baseball and get these slash line numbers up. He's not hitting the ball hard. He's not elevating the baseball, and he has not had great at-bats at all. You look at some of these other ones as well. For the most part, he's really under the major league average at the plate, which is very, very concerning. And also, if you look back to the 2020 stats, it was very similar in terms of Gleyber Torres looking like an under-average hitter. Let's flip over to Fangraphs, and I want to particularly look at his defensive stats. Obviously, Gleyber Torres in that game against the Orioles blew the game in the 10th inning. He's made a lot of errors that, Gleyber Torres has seemingly made over the course of really since he's come to the major leagues, and he's not a solid defensive shortstop. But this stat shows you all you need to know. So this is a defensive stat that basically takes into consideration your fielding and adjusts it based on the position you play. So obviously shortstop is a tougher position, so it takes that all into effect, and it really sort of makes that into one stat. Now, Glaber Torres minus 7.9 2018, minus 2.6 2019, minus 3.4 in 2020. Now, as we've seen from Glaber Torres in the past couple of years, he's not only lost games for the Yankees, but he's been in double-digit errors. He is becoming a defensive liability. Let's flip over to Glaber Torres' stats because I want to look at his 2019 stat line where he finished 17th in AL MVP. Now, AL MVP, again, it's voted by people, so we can't put too much weight onto that. But Gleyber Torres in 2019 hit 38 home runs, had 90 RBIs, had an over 275 batting average, had a 337 OBP, which is not great. And those are the numbers I want to focus on. For a guy who hits 38 home runs with a 278 batting average, there has to be an underlying thing of why he only finished 17th in AL MVP. Well, I look at a few stats here. You look at, first of all, 129 strikeouts. Gleyber Torres strikes out essentially right around 20% of the time. You also look at a guy who hit 38 home runs, only a 535 slugging, an 871 OPS. Two numbers that are very, very low for a guy who's considered a power hitter. And for a guy who put up 38 home runs and even 26 doubles, he only hits extra base hits in that 2019 year. Both the slugging, OPS very low. He also doesn't walk a lot, only 48 walks compared to the 129 strikeouts. 337 is very low. Also was in double-digit errors in that year. Now, moving forward, I mean, the Yankees obviously got Rougned Odor. You could try moving Glaber Torres to second, a bit easier of a position in terms of, playing the infield and still keeping Glaber Torres with some of the value that he could potentially get defensively. But one guy that I'm particularly looking at for the Yankees to potentially acquire either at the deadline or also as a free agent at the end of the year is a guy like Trevor Story. Now, Trevor Story's off to a bit of a slow start this year. But he, in my opinion, is one of the best shortstops in all of Major League Baseball. And only 28 years old, so he still has the H factor to him. And if the Yankees really want to make a push this year or next year in the upcoming years, Trevor Story might be a better route for the Yankees than a guy like Glaber Torres. You're looking at a guy who will skip 2020. In 2019-18, put up 35, 37 home runs, and a guy who could potentially push 40 home runs. Now, I know he's playing in Colorado, but when you look at hitters' parks and stadiums, Yankees Stadium is pretty much just as good of a hitter's park. He's finished inside the top 12 of MVP 3 years in a row, 2019, 20, and 18. Finished with a pair of Silver Sluggers and really being good ever since he's come up to the majors in 2016. Now for the Yankees, again, he's an expiring contract at the end of this year, so obviously you don't want to do something where it's a Gleyber Torres for Trevor Story package straight up. But if they could potentially get somebody back, if they could guarantee that Trevor Story is re-signing with the Yankees at the end of the year, I think it's definitely somebody to look at. But of course, obviously, the Yankees still have enough money with no salary cap in baseball to be able to go out. And if they really do want to move away from Glaber Torres, potentially sign Trevor Story in the offseason, move Glaber Torres to second, or even take some of the name value that Glaber Torres still has and potentially try to even flip him in the offseason, because there would definitely be some takers. But it's a really complicated situation. Hopefully this gave you some insight as to what Glaber Torres has both been doing defensively and also what we've seen from Glaber Torres today at the plate. This year and even last year at the plate. So let me know your thoughts, your comments on Torres down in the comment section below. What should the Yankees do with him? What do you want to see from Glaber Torres in general for the rest of this 2021 season? If you did enjoy today's video, though, make sure to leave a thumbs up. Make sure to subscribe to Touchdowns to Home Runs for more breakdowns just like these. If there's a particular team, particular player that you really want me to focus on, let me know down in the comment section below, and I'll gladly get onto that. But as always, guys, if you did make it to this point in the video, thank you so much for watching, and hope to see you again next time.